Hi, everyone. Thank you for tuning into another episode of the Say What podcast. In this episode, we will discuss everything you need to know about demand response. Today, I have Michael DeCaluwe with me, who is the president of Nania Energy. Thank you for joining me today, Michael.
Thanks, Joe, and happy to be here to talk about this important topic.
All right, so let's dive in. If you don't mind, I think we should start with the basics. So the first question being, what is demand response?
Sure. No, that's a good place to start. Demand response, or the acronym is DR. It's a program that pays customers for their ability to reduce usage during times of peak demand. So what does that mean in English? Peak demand days, if you think about it, it's going to be a hot summer day. It's 100 degrees. Everybody turns their AC up to cool themselves. That's going to be a peak usage day. So demand goes way up for electricity, frankly, more than the grid can handle. Conversely, in the winter, if we've got a polar vortex day that gets sub-zero, again, everybody's furnaces and heating systems kick on. That's typically going to be a peak day as well. So primarily, it's weather driven, as a commercial customer, if I can reduce usage during those peak days, then I can qualify for demand response payments.
Okay, so how is that linked to capacity?
Yep, that's a really good question. So I think it's helpful to define what is capacity. Again, depending on the market, many regional grids in the US have what's called a capacity market. What does that mean? That is a charge that we all pay into to make sure that we've got power during those times of peak demand. So again, one unique thing about electricity is we've got no meaningful storage in the US. So we need to make the power at the same time, the same hour that we're using it. And to help balance that supply demand, that's what the capacity market is for. So if I put that into kind of a layman's term, if you think about Uber, if we went out to the bar tonight and we went till close, we got out at midnight and we both went to get an Uber, what would happen? We'd probably see a really high price, and that's called surge pricing. It's that same concept that applies to the electricity market. When everybody else wants power during those peak times and there's not enough drivers, for Uber, then we get hit with a higher cost, and that's that capacity cost in simple terms.
Okay, so let's get into a bit more detail. So if a company decided that they wanted to participate in a demand response program, what would the process look like, and are there any risks?
Yep. So the process, again, the reason why this is so lucrative is that particularly in the PJM market, it's Pennsylvania, Jersey, and Maryland, and they operate the grid from Illinois and ComEd all the way over to Virginia up to New Jersey. So all that space in between outside of Indiana, PJM operates, and their capacity costs are scheduled to go up 800% starting next June. So why does that matter? Demand response payments are linked to that capacity charge. So demand response payments also went up 800%. So that's why we're talking about this now. And most markets are seeing higher capacity costs and higher demand response payments. So again, more lucrative. So if there was interest in doing so, a commercial customer would engage with a demand response provider. There's numerous ones out there, and you negotiate. And what your contract would look like, it would have a set volume, and that volume means what can I reduce from last summer's peaks, and based on that number, you'd get payments. So another aspect of the contract is you want to negotiate with the demand response provider for a percentage. And what you're negotiating is what percent of those demand response payments does the customer keep? So we've seen that number be anywhere from 50% up to 85, 90% for customers that can participate at a higher level. So you want to make sure, you've got a good number and a realistic number that you can reduce. B, that you're maximizing as much of that retention revenue as possible. And finally, C, you want to make sure that there's no penalties levied against you in the event that you can't comply with the program.
Thank you for sharing all that. So are there any questions that the company should be asking as they negotiate the agreement?
Yep, there's a lot of questions. You want to make sure, number one, again, that there's no penalties, that if you couldn't comply, what'll happen is if you enroll, let's just say for a megawatt, say I can reduce for a megawatt, you'll get a test event. And the grid wants to say, hey, can you really comply with that level? Or are you just, inflating your number? So there'll be a real-time test. You'll get advance notice of the day and then that the test event will happen. And then that morning, you'll get a notice of what hours that the test event will be, and you'll be required to comply specifically in the PJM market for 2 hours. Again, if you hit that test event, then you're qualified to get those dollars. If there's ever a real event, then and the grid would call your demand response provider would call you, you would also need to comply with whatever number that you enrolled in the program. So you want to, again, you want to ask if I don't comply, are there any penalties on my end? And you want to make sure that the demand response provider would cover any penalties. Conversely, again, you want to make sure you're maximizing your dollar. So you want that percentage to be as high as possible. And third, you really want to make sure that you're getting the smart people in the room when you're talking about your compliance number, meaning what megawatt or kilowatt number can I enroll into the program. So you want to make sure you're getting, if you're a manufacturer, your ops people, are there any machines you can shut down, your facilities people, if you've got an on-site engineer, or if you're for a commercial building, you want to make sure you've got the people that operating the equipment as part of that process of review. Conversely, a lot of these demand response providers have in-house engineers as well. You want to make sure your engineers are dialoguing with their engineers too. So you're coming up with a realistic number for DR participation.
Okay, so once they are enrolled and they have their agreement settled, how do the demand response payments work?
Yep, that's going to depend on demanders, the provider, but they're either paid you seasonally or quarterly. So again, we're right now for, again, back to PJM, we're signing up for the next period that starts next June. So you'd be looking at payments for that period coming next August or next September.
Okay, so as we start wrapping up here, I feel like we have to bring up solar and renewable energy since they're such hot topics right now. If someone has on-site solar, does demand response help with that at all?
It depends. And what that means is it depends on the state. For instance, in Illinois, so let's say your peaks are set this summer, and over the winter we built on-site solar. Just by nature of having solar, you would be able to roll in demand response because you'd be reducing from your peaks next summer. Because instead of pulling from the grid, your solar would be producing. So you basically got a built-in compliance tool, at least for year one. However, it depends on the state. So I'll give an example like Pennsylvania, there's a state law that prevents those with solar PV systems from participating in demand response programs. So the PUC for now prevents those customers in Pennsylvania specifically from participating. So you got to make sure that you're looking at your state law and your state PUC code as far as compliance. So back to your question, can you enroll with on-site solar? Yes, but depends.
Okay, so if we look at renewable energy, does demand response provide the company any renewable energy claims?
Not directly, but maybe ancillarily. So what does that mean? That means you're not reducing your carbon footprint by enrolling, but you are helping the grid maintain its reliability and probably as an offshoot, stay green. What does that mean? The grid needs, again, power during those really peak times. Back to Uber, I can either raise my rate and surge pricing and incentivize new drivers, or I can pay people to come out of the bar not at midnight. That's what demand response is doing. I'm paying you to come out at 10 o'clock when there's more drivers, not at 12. So I'm creating a more reliable grid, and I'm negating the need to build peaker plants, which are not great environmentally. So I'm paying, instead of building those plants, I'm paying you not to use power during those times.
Okay, so I feel like we covered a lot today. So thank you again, Michael, for being here. If our listeners have any questions, who should they reach out to?
You can reach out to anybody here at NEA Energy. Each of our advisors is well versed in the demand response markets, and other options available for you on your energy journey.
Thank you to all our listeners for tuning in, and keep an eye out for our next Say What podcast.